Hello, my name is Nimesh. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. This is Christmas Eve 2020. Today I want to share with you my personal journey through the poverty cycle and homeless cycle in Australia, which has some lessons. Bear with me throughout this video because I will from time to time refer to my notes, which was a blog post that I had written. As some of you may know, I migrated to Australia in 2010, a few hours before my 30th birthday, to start over new at the age of 30. I had a bag full of dreams. If any one of you have come from a third world country or in a third world country, you may already know what the Australian dream is. In addition to this Australian dream, I also had a dream for finding my freedom to be who I am, and legal to be who I am. So although initially I had my family with me to support me, I was quite unhappy throughout my first couple of years, although I had a high-end job, a well-paid job with the leading communications provider in Australia. Now, during this time, knowingly or unknowingly, I was quite unsettled. So that led me to relocate from Melbourne to northern New South Wales, to start up a business in Gold Coast. I left a high-paying job to start up this business. This was the first time that I actually ended up being poor. So in 2012 December, 2013 December, if I'm not mistaken, or November time frame, with a lot of shame, I went to the Centrelink office in Tweed Heads, northern New South Wales. Now, when I was working, every Friday, I used to get $2,000 in my bank account after tax. And the Centrelink payment I knew was only going to be $500 to cover for a fortnight. Now, this itself put me on a shame and guilt cycle. However, as soon as I walked into the Centrelink office, the ladies there was quite kind, and it wasn't automated at the time, so they accepted me. They looked through my files and they immediately approved my application, and even back paid to the date that I actually lost the job. So I was quite blessed. Although it was a little money, I was quite blessed. So and at the same time, I also relocated back to Melbourne, hoping that my chances of finding work in Melbourne was better. But unfortunately for me, a few weeks later, I got called for an interview just in Queensland, in Sunshine Coast. The organization flew me up to Sunshine Coast for the interview, but once I landed the job, the relocation part was my responsibility. Now, I was too embarrassed to tell my employer that I was poor, so I actually walked to Centrelink office in Dandenong, Melbourne, and asked them whether they could fund me $1,000 or lend me $1,000 to be deducted from my tax with the job offer in hand. However, the lady at the counter apologetically told me that the system does not have space for this sort of a request. Therefore, I had to find my own way. Now, fortunately, my mother was there, who funded me to relocate, and I also had a beautiful friend who accepted me on the other end in Sunshine Coast, who housed me and didn't charge me rent and fed me until I got my first salary in that organization. Now, unlike where I come from, Australian government, although I'm going to talk about improvements, has been very kind towards the poor. We have a system in place to look after the poor and look after the needy. But this is not my ungratefulness, this is just some space for improvement. Now, in the first scenario that I spoke about, what if I didn't have my mother? What if I didn't really have anybody? What if there was no funding available for me to relocate? This would mean that I would have to give up the job offer I had on hand, which was a relatively high income job, where what meant was that I would be paying government tax. So it was really absurd that the government wasn't helping me to get a job to pay them back again, start paying them back to fund the systems in place. So this is a gap in the system that I first saw early in my life in Australia. Just give me 2 seconds. So, however, the universe continued to want me to learn about the systems in place. So in 2015, I had a certain episode. I called it a spiritual turn, but it was also deemed as a mental breakdown. I don't particularly care about the label anymore, but what happened was I left my job and I ended up staying in a monastery. The monastery was in Melbourne. Now, I had sufficient leave accumulated and I had some pay, so throughout my stay in the monastery with very little expenses, I managed to stay in the monastery and do my spiritual work. But once I came out of the monastery, I had to go to Centrelink again. This time around, it was relatively easy. I also had a mental health label attached. I had letters, so it was relatively easy to get through to the system. But then I ended up getting a job in a reputed law firm. They hired me through a consulting company. The consulting company had a payment cycle where I had to work 2 months before I get my first pay. Unfortunately, to Centrelink, as soon as you get a job, you have to report that you have got a job. And as soon as I reported that I have a job, they cut my income. So now I had to go to work for 2 months, travel daily, paying about $15 a day for transport, food, and also socializing. I also had to meet the social responsibilities of keeping my head high, pretending I had no issues, and even adhere to social requirements. People wanted to go out for drinks, etc., etc. Fortunately, during this time, once again, my family, my sister at the time, lent me some money, and I was being lodged at her place as well. So I managed to save quite a bit of money. I managed to survive. But once again, I wanted to show you a little tiny gap there as well in the system where the payment gets cut off before the first income hits our bank account, which means that there's a big potential, if I didn't have any support, for me to let go of my work, because I couldn't get to work, I couldn't travel to work, and if I had a serious mental health issue at the time, the social responsibilities would have been seen as extremely difficult to meet, and it would have put me in a different cycle of a mental health issue, and I would not have been able to cope. Fortunately for me, that time around, I managed to avoid that and get through life. Do I learn? Clearly not. In 2017, I was madly in love with somebody. From 2015, it was this whole love story going on. But 2017, I also imagined a potential wedding. Australia was doing a marriage equality campaign. And my boyfriend and I was in talking terms then, and I was going to submit a Centrelink application. With his permission, I decided to put him as my partner. Now, that time around, that was the Pakenham Centrelink office. I believe it was 10th of October 2017. The systems were all automated. There was very little help. I also remember there was a lady that was from African origin who was quite struggling with the system as well. She was trying to get help, and there was a lady to help, but with the numbers it didn't really match. And I personally struggled because I had just put my partner details, but then the application process requires you to enter partner income, partner assets, and partner debt, which I knew nothing about. This partner was in Switzerland, and I didn't really want to bother him with my financial difficulties, which was my own doing. So with that madness in mind, I submitted the application, but that application got rejected. Now, once again, I wanted to show you, if we remove my madness aside, if I had a human interaction and a one-on-one setup, they would have advised me what to do, what not to do. But I didn't have that. So once again, I actually, that time I failed. The system failed on me, and I couldn't really get through. However, and this particular instance, my sister and I also fell out, along with some other family in Australia as well. I would take a lot of blame to myself as well. This is not about my family, but this is purely about the systems in place. It occurred, like, I also went through a homeless cycle. My neighbors looked after me, and some of my friends looked after me, and one of my former colleagues looked after me as well. I drove Uber for a while to get some income, but my personal way of handling Uber didn't really get me anything in the end. However, in this instance, I experienced homeless cycle as well briefly. After a while, my mother summoned me to Sri Lanka, so I went. Basically, I packed a bag of whatever was left over as clothes after giving away majority of whatever I owned, and I went home back to Sri Lanka. I lived there for 4 months holiday. Once I came back, a disability pensioner, one of my very good friends now, who lives in a housing commission house, looked after me. So yes, you heard it right. A household looked after me, and he gave me sufficient emotional and psychological safety for me to apply for work and get a new job. This time around, I knew the system very well, so I didn't report the job or the income until such time I had a salary in my account. So yes, you heard it right. I lied to the system. I didn't do the due diligence simply because I knew the consequences and I knew the system was broken there. So as you can see, once again, I was only trying to highlight, by the way, with time all of that lies told got settled, because the government can see all the tax income and how much they paid and everything, so everything gets reabsorbed anyway. So it wasn't like a huge fraud or anything. But what I wanted to show you is that any person who wanted to do the job right automatically felt like becoming what the society calls a rat, to go through the loopholes of the system. So I chose to go through a loophole because I knew this is not going to work on behalf of me and I'm going to get stuck. Now, all 3 times with Centrelink, the next bit I wanted to say was all 3 times with Centrelink, I had to go to what was called job service providers. Now, job service providers are organizations where they help you do your resume, they help you upskill yourself, do an application. But with my education and qualifications and my ability to write a resume, the job service providers all 3 times ended up telling me that they had actually nothing to offer than the free Wi-Fi and the computers. I already had free Wi-Fi and the computers, either at the places where I lodged or the local library. So I didn't really need that. So what I wanted to show you there as well, the design of the job service provider organizations weren't sufficient in terms of equality. It doesn't matter whether I'm highly educated or moderately educated or uneducated, as we put it. The system wasn't designed to cater for everyone. When you're poor, all of us are in the same level. We are equal, and the system should be equal to us, but it wasn't. However, these people were really kind to me. This is once again not bagging the organizations themselves, but the system was a little flawed there, that I couldn't really get any help. Not to mention, these job service providers didn't have any connection with employers either. And in our society, the employers and the employment agencies are also nowadays extremely used to looking for people who are already employed. So there's also a saying to be employed, you need to be employable, you need to be employed. Now, it's a ridiculous vicious cycle because there are so many people who have the skills, who are educated, who has the need to work, but none of the job boards or job people who have vacancies, including government job boards, prefer to poach people from one another than look at the people who have gone on the dole. So this as well is a little flawed, and it will be really good if we can look at this as well as a society. Now, if I talk about the homeless cycle, is much more vicious. Fortunately, I didn't have to experience that a lot. But with my brief experience, I can tell you, when you're in that cycle with that level of income, without a roof over your head, you really do not, you're struggling to make ends meet, you're struggling to make the appointments with the doctors or with whatever agency you are asked to go here at this time, asked to go to another place at another time. On top of it, you need to now settle and write a job application. Job application is a creative task. So where I'm coming from is, for people who are in the homeless cycle, it is a huge mental, emotional strain, and they probably 90% will not have that strength to apply for a decent job. They will not have the confidence, they will not have the strength to present themselves up. They'll most probably not meet the schedule, or I'm sorry, I hope you can't hear that helicopter, it's a bit loud for me. So they might probably miss appointments, and they might not be able to keep at it. And coming from the homeless cycle, if you even get employed, it will probably be very difficult to keep the job. So as you can see, the homeless cycle is an even worse cycle, and not to mention the society is also harshly judges what they call the households. For example, if a household runs naked across the street versus someone from a royal family decides to run naked on the street, the society judges both, but the judgment is extremely different, and also the impact of the individual is different. Everything is different. It is seen completely differently, and the impacts are different. I've witnessed it, and it is really, really harsh. Somehow the society, either due to ignorance or to palm of responsibility, they have just decided to ignore that bit and just harshly judge. And what I wanted to remind you was whether it's the government, royal families, or high-end religious institutes, or high-income private organizations, or normal households, just like those things, even in among households, there's probably crooks, liars, and all these people. So, however, as per the society's view, as my interpretation of the society's views, I feel the deadly sins are more sinful if you're a household. If you're rich and famous, you're a little bit okay. So, as you can see, my life has had its challenges. I have some trauma from these experiences, and I do have to work through them. And I do have a psychologist to work through them. I have some trauma from previous episodes as well before Australia. But each and every episode, I've also been observant to see the lessons. This is my attempt to once again, I have spoken about this story many times. I'm sure I'm repeating myself as well, but it is my effort to remind the society that those who have had some responsibility to attempt to take people out of these vicious poverty and homeless cycles. I personally do have some conscious business models specifically targeted towards poor and homeless audiences, but they're all in paper. They've all been ideas. I, up to date, haven't had the mental strength, financial strength, or the courage, or the support to take them off the ground. However, this is Christmas Eve 2020, and if we are celebrating Jesus, let's truly celebrate. Let's hope that we can address some of these issues and work towards a better world. Thank you so much. Have a lovely Christmas. Signing off. Bye.